I can barely hear you guys.
I don't know if anybody's mic was on. Is
How
that
about
better,
now?
Sarah?
Yep, that's better.
Okay.
And I can't see you, but that might be intentional.
Yeah, I think we're just waiting the 2 minutes until 7.
Gotcha. Cool.
Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, there's nobody else on right now. Yeah.
We have any pools? Yeah. Sweet. I didn't say that. She asked me.
Oh, please.
That's right. Wait, pool testing's happening to me? Yeah. Oh, fine.
All right. Ready? Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call our meeting to order. This is the Scarborough Public Schools Board of Education regular meeting. Tonight is Thursday, October 7th, 2021, and it is 7 p.m. Could I have the attendance, please?
Sure. Mrs. Giftis?
Here.
Dr. Gill?
Here.
Ms. Casalonis?
Here.
Ms. Layton?
Here.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Here.
Mrs. Seither?
Here.
Mrs. Turner?
Here.
Ms. Giftis? Here. And Ms. Bertulia?
Here. Thank you. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Agenda item 4.0 is adjustments to the agenda. Are there any adjustments this evening?
No adjustments this evening.
Thank you. Agenda item 5.0 is public comment on agenda items. Is there anyone wishing to make public comment this evening? As a quick reminder, please address your comments to me as the chair. Please state your name before you begin speaking and limit yourself to 3 minutes.
All right. Good evening. My name is Chris. I attended the September 2nd school board meeting, and I provided a few stats and facts. And when I concluded my remarks, I asked a question, and I was hoping to get some feedback on that, saying, what is the metric for success when it comes to universal masking in the schools? I haven't seen any communication since that meeting. I haven't seen any agenda items. I went back and rewatched the workshop from August. And I know we said we're going to revisit and repeat. It's something that's worth reviewing and updating. So we're a month into the school year, and I want to see where we stood at defining a point in which the mask can come off the children. When I watched the August workshop, I know that the district doctor said, we need to see vaccinations go up and cases go down. That's not a SMART goal. SMART being specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. Okay, so I've seen emails from the superintendent saying 97% of district staff are vaccinated. Can't get much better than that. We need to see vaccinations go up. To what point, I ask? I saw an email that said we had 13 cases district-wide in a 14-day period. That's less than 1 case per day. And a lot of the people that were identified weren't staff or students. It said people who hadn't been in contact with the school for a number of days. Again, you can't get much better than that. Less than 1 per day. Correlation does not equal causation. Let me remind you of that. Look no further than local daycares and private schools who do not have universal masking. Are you aware of any outbreaks at those institutions? Neither am I. The answer is obviously no. I leave you with this quote from the CDC. CDC is not aware of any randomized controlled trials that show that masks or double masks or cloth face coverings are effective against COVID-19. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Would you mind stating your full name for the public record?
Chris John.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to make public comment this evening? No one on Zoom? Okay, with that, I will go ahead and close public comment. Agenda item 6.0 is the superintendent's report.
All right, thank you. To bring up the next slide, 2 big items just as part of my report. The first, as we discussed back in, I think it was in the August meeting, or maybe it was the first meeting in September, of doing regular COVID updates, see where we are. Just to highlight a couple of bullets with respect to the start of the school year and where we are. So the first, just to remind the public that as part of our weekly district-wide update, we're including a dashboard which outlines the number of positive cases that we've had, as well as close contacts that are school-related and as well as community-related. And that has been being presented weekly. As far as the pooled testing implementation, so now we are in, I believe, week 2, right? Almost done, almost 2 weeks into implementation at the K-2 schools. We've had all negative pools, so we haven't had a positive pool yet, but participation is high, and implementation has been going very smoothly. So we're anticipating being able to ramp up and get started at Wentworth the week, I think, of the 19th. Does that sound right? Yeah. October 19th, starting that week with pooled testing 3 to 5 at Wentworth, and then work our way. We're still working out the implementation timeline for middle school and then finally high school. So that's the pooled testing implementation and timeline. And I just can't say enough about our health services and nursing staff who just have, picked this ball up and run with it, as well as our pool testing coordinator. It's been very well implemented thus far. And with regard to the staff vaccination rates, if you check the DOE website, it's still going to say not submitted for Scarborough because they're not going to release the updated data on staff vaccination rates until October 15th. That's the next time they will update that database and release it. So we've fixed the glitch, submitted our data for the next round. We've had significantly more of our staff respond to the survey We were a little over 300 staff having responded back at the beginning of September. We're now probably over 400, in addition to several people who have submitted their proof of vaccination to us. So we're still at about, it's still hovering at about 96, 97% as far as staff vaccination rates. And we're probably closer, I would say, to 2/3 to 3/4 of staff responding. Given that, some of that staff vaccination reporting may become moot within a month or so with some new federal OSHA requirements that are requiring, similar to federal employees, they're requiring public school staff members to either be vaccinated or submit to a weekly testing protocol. So that's coming down the pike probably within a month or two. I just want to put that on everybody's radar that it will likely be a mandate in the very near future. So also, what else we got? Oh, little birdies are saying that the emergency authorization for vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds could be coming down from the FDA by the end of the month, potentially even. So that's something to look forward to around the corner. The second part of my update this evening is around the turf field and track renovation update. And I wanted to give Mike Legage the opportunity to present some slides that he also presented at our town council meeting last night, just to kind of update the board and the public about where we are with the turf field and track renovation project.
Thank you. Last night, Mr. Sousa and I did give an update to the town council about the turf track project. And I can tell you that I'll go through the slides here like we did last night. The turf's about 8 years past its anticipated life expectancy. And certainly the track is part of that equation as well. To get updated, it's in pretty bad condition. I think the two projects certainly go hand in hand with each other. Certainly without these renovations, the facility faces closure because of worsening conditions and safety concerns. I think the entire community benefits from this facility, certainly our youth programs and obviously the community recreation programs. But I think beyond that, our town also benefits from this facility in terms of creating a place for the community to come together and bond. The project will need to not exceed the referendum request, certainly. In 2019, the original request was actually 1.6 million. The final number that was not approved that year was 1.2 million. Those deductions to the 1.2 million were a direct result of the negotiations we did with the final two companies. There was nothing removed from the request. It was just a renegotiation through the RFP process that we were able to, at that time, get that company down to that $1.2 million figure. Additionally, we had invited Woodard & Curran to an initial meeting. As you might know, Woodard & Curran is an engineering firm that the town regularly uses and certainly have the expertise in this area. The new number for this year on the referendum includes the increased cost of materials and labor, which Woodard & Curran really helped provide some insight about, as well as the engineering costs. There's been no money promised to anybody at this point for this project. Once the referendum is approved, then we will begin to lay out the scope and sequence of the work to be done. Working backwards, our plan would be to try to do this sort of work in the spring season and have it ready for the beginning of the fall high school athletic season. But I'd also just add, because there's been some discussion about grass versus turf, and that conversation was never really a consideration. We are a turf facility. The turf affords us greater consistency, durability, and extended use in our main climate. I think we can go on. I'll have to, this was Mr. Seuss's part, so. So I'll wing it a little bit. We can go back to the previous one, Mr. Bruno. But you can see about the outreach efforts. We have, the committee has been wonderful in helping with getting the website going and getting some information out to everybody. And we're kind of beginning that process. I think there's been some things in the newsletters and some things going in the leader. Maybe some of you can even speak more about that. We've connected with our booster groups that are that facility impacts. And the web page is connected to the town page as well. And so there is some information out there. The map up here really does depict kind of the new layout of the facility. Nothing really changed except for the long jump pits on the right-hand side are more in line with Federation regulations and safety. And then the discus pit on the left-hand side, if you're looking at it, we do plan to adjust back so that it doesn't encroach on the turf field right now, because anybody that's been to any of the games, when that discus pit is up, you always see that we have to kind of push it in to get it out of the way, which then damages it, frankly. It's been replaced a couple times because of that. So it's either take it completely down every time or, push it in to get it out of the way. The other added thing that doesn't show there is we have talked about running power to the inside track turf area. Because right now, if we want power, they have to run cords overhead of the lanes to the storage garage. That's down in the right-hand corner. So that green area down the right-hand corner before you get to the black turf, in that area is where we would put an electrical box. The other thing is the exterior fencing around the track is really not in line with safety precautions through the Federation rules. And we're going to do our best to get that to that point. The trouble is the spacing. On the big bleacher side, we can only adjust so far before we would have to move those bleachers, which was not figured into the cost of the project. On the other side, we have some, way that we can push that fence out a little bit. On the end pathway, as you know, those are all the things that we still have to work out. But I think we have a strong plan for it, having gone through it before, and a strong idea of what we'd like to do. And then it's just kind of working out the engineering of that. This next page kind of shows us the connection to the web page and the QR code. And that information is available around different places, and will start to appear on the rosters that we give out at games as well, make available to community members at games. That will start tomorrow. And then if we move on to the next one, that Allison Carrier, who's the town communications person, has really helped with this project as well, at least this kind of first part of it. And so she kind of laid out this schedule, if you will, about the different things that need to be addressed at different times. So you can kind of take a peek at that. There's a lot of information on that. And then I think I kind of already mentioned some of these things on the key messages, but certainly we will stay within the framework of the referendum number. Obviously, we're going to try to negotiate the best price we can get. and be able to try to do all the things that we still want to do. But have to be some decisions made moving forward once we get through the referendum in terms of what are those things that that we will be able to have. And, a company available. Like I said, we haven't really moved forward with kind of scope and sequence until we have the referendum vote. You can see a little bit about numbers too. I mean, it's a facility that's highly used beyond the high school program, certainly physical education classes, as well as after-school activities and youth community programs, and generally the community that comes over and uses it during downtimes for recreational purposes. So we're hoping that this new turf will give us 10 years. The last turf was 8 years. But with new advances in that, we see if we can get a longer shelf life on it as well. But certainly as part of our plans, we need to be forward thinking that these facilities aren't forever, certainly. So just in back of mind, thinking about that as well. Questions?
I almost took my mask off to ask a question. There's one thing, it's not really a question so much as I wanted to thank you for pointing out something that really stood out to me in your presentation. All of it was great, but what I really appreciated was the clarification about the change in dollar figure, because there has been some misinformation out there about how, and it doesn't matter where it came from, right? But it says, we went from 1.6 to 1.2. Why aren't we changing the scope of the project? And your clarification was so critical, because that's what RFPs are all about. It's all about having that competitive bidding process so that you can eventually, hopefully, wind up with a price that's maybe a little better than the maximum that you're asking for. And that's exactly what we're doing here this time, but with, of course, a couple years of inflation worked in. So I really appreciate you drawing attention to that, because I think that's misunderstood by some of our voters. The other thing that I just wanted to kind of highlight, because I saw it in your slides, is the video that's out there.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed with that video, because as someone that doesn't get closer to that track than Route 114, you don't realize just how discolored and how threadbare, for lack of a better term, that field really is in places, and particularly places where it's highly worn, where bodies fall on it. And that's where you want it to be really in the best condition for safety. So for anyone in the town, and people in my neighborhood have asked me about it, and I've been referring people to that video, because pictures worth 1,000 words. And when you get that close to it and you fly over it with that drone perspective, you really see just how worn and ready it is to be replaced. And I don't think you see that even from the bleachers like you see it in that video. I think that's just such an important resource that you all put out for the community to understand the importance of this project.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll add that we've just put out today, I think Allison just put out today, the dates of some tours that we're going to host through the athletic department. So people will be able to go link to that webpage and find that information about the tour dates and times. And people can certainly come down and see it firsthand for themselves.
The first tour date is tomorrow night at 5:30.
Yes.
Yes, so let's put in a plug for tomorrow night. Any other questions for Mike? Excellent, Mike. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time last night at the council meeting as well.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you to Leanne, Shannon, and Kristen too, who have been meeting every week, and we've got and Allison Carrier has been really, just quarterbacking a lot of the communications and creating a lot of the slides, and just really kind of like orchestrating a whole lot of really effective communication and the videos and the webpage and everything. It's been really, I think, a super successful collaboration. It's been great. And thank you, Mike.
Excellent. Agenda item, where are we here? 7.0 is the chair's report. Agenda item 7.1 is the MSBA resolutions. I actually have just a couple of quick announcements before I get into an overview of the MSBA resolutions. If you could just advance my slide, Diane, thank you. So a few quick announcements, early voting and absentee ballots are available now. Election day is Tuesday, November 2nd. Voting will take place at Scarborough High School from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Obviously, we're encouraging people to vote yes on the turf track. So if for no other reason municipal elections matter, please, please, please get out and vote. The MSBA Fall Conference will be held on October 28th and 29th. If you haven't already done so, please make sure that you let Kelly know of your interest in registration. And our own school board will be having our fall retreat on Tuesday, October 9th at 6 p.m. Kelly has booked the high school study center for us so that we'll have some room to spread out. And just like all of our meetings, it is open to the public. And it will be, I will post an agenda, but really the point of it is for us to review our board goals. With 3 of us leaving the board in a couple short weeks, I really wanted the opportunity to bring us all together with Jeff, which hasn't happened in a not so formal setting, to discuss where we've been and where we'd like to see the board go. And then lastly, I did want to touch on the MSBA resolutions. They are an action item later on in the agenda. We have had these resolutions emailed to us from MSBA for weeks and weeks. Periodically, I drop them into my weekly update just to remind everyone to take a look at them. No good deed goes unpunished, because I sent my weekly update yesterday morning, and then MSBA sent us an updated copy of the resolutions about 2 hours later. And I did forward those. Again, that is the document that we will be working off from tonight when we get ready to make our recommendations and potential approvals. For the general public, I did put a link to the resolutions. Just as a little bit of background, the Maine School Board Association has a board similar to ours that represents the various regions within the state. And they gather to make goals where they would like to see the state school boards go. A lot of times their goals are linked to legislation that they would like to see happen. Policy, district-wide, statewide policy decisions that they would like to see made. And so those recommendations and reviews come out once a year. We review them at the local level here, and then we elect a delegate to attend the delegate assembly. This year we elected Shannon, and she will attend the delegate assembly and vote on our behalf. A lot of times the delegate assembly gets a little wild, and there are a lot of parliamentary procedures and amendments being made and all kinds of suggestions to the language. I did feel like Steve Bailey did a really good job this year organizing the region meetings to try and preempt some of the language changes that sometimes happen in real time. As a delegate in the past, one of the challenges I had was when the language gets changed so much by other people in attendance that you're not sure if this board would still support the resolution. And I actually have abstained from a vote 2 years ago, because by the time they were done rewording it, I didn't feel like it was even close to what we had discussed as a board. So even if we are in full support of the proposed resolutions, changes, revisions, I do think it's really important for us to have some discussion prior to voting so that Shannon has a little bit of insight into our thinking, so that if they do make a lot of changes in real time, she can have this conversation to pull from when she gets ready to vote and represent Scarborough. So that will be taking place on Saturday, 10/23 at 9:30 a.m. And thank you again to Shannon for stepping up to do that. We can have that full discussion under new business. My last little bit from my chair's report is Diane let us know that there is going to be some new legislation taking effect on 10/18/21, which affects several of our policies. The first one, in terms of how we operate, LD 32 is requiring that we have a policy that allows us to meet remotely. And that doesn't apply to committee meetings. If you remember when we had Melissa Huey come She kind of laid out the difference for us between a public meeting, which is anytime we're all together as a quorum, versus a committee meeting, which doesn't necessarily have the same rules apply to it. So this legislation applies to full board meetings. And in order to conduct a full board meeting remotely, there are certain criteria that we have to meet. And one of those criteria is that we have to have a policy in order for that to happen. So these have become urgent. I'm hoping that the policy committee will be able to, at the very least, take a crack at these so that we can get them to first reading relatively soon. And that way, we'll at least have the ball rolling on these. And obviously, they're all important, but LD 32 applies probably most directly to the way we are operating right now. I think that wraps up my chair's report. I don't have a copy of the agenda. I did on my computer and I closed it. Agenda item 8.0 is committee reports. Communications.
Just to round out the conversation that we just had with respect to the vote, the committee has been meeting quite a bit. I've added a few extra links in here just because we want to make sure everybody sees the QR code, the webpage, and the video. But most importantly, the turf and track tours do start tomorrow night. We are asking that board members be available. So wondering if anyone from the board would be available tomorrow night to, thank you, April.
I already clicked yes on Facebook, so I'm publicly
Excellent.
committed.
Excellent. We're just there in order to provide any support if people ask questions of us as it stands from a board perspective, but that will be led by Jordan and Mike. I think it's really valuable. I'm hoping that it gets great turnout. Please share it with friends and family through Facebook. That's how it's an event out there. The more people, to Nick's point, that see the state of the turf and the track, I think it's the story that tells itself. It has to be replaced. The next one will be Tuesday, October 12th at 3:30, and then next Friday, October 15th at 5:30. So if you could let me know if you can attend, that would be great. So we make sure that we have coverage. I think that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Leanne. Negotiations.
All right. I'm not usually a fan of busy slides, but we have a lot of things kind of happening in negotiations. And as you all know, negotiations is one of our unique committees because so much of what we do is confidential. But what I can share are some of the dates and some of the facts and just some of the status of where things are, particularly as we head toward the beginning of November, where I'll be passing this baton to someone new. So I wanted to share as much as I could with you all tonight, as well as the public and our community. So to start off, you all know that the Transportation CBA, we voted to ratify that on the 16th of September. The SCA membership was scheduled to vote today at 4:30, which is not that long ago. So we don't know how that vote went, but certainly once we have that information, we'll be sharing that with the public. And it is my hope that if that goes through, that in our last meeting together, as kind of my swan song, I'm able to give a presentation of that contract and some of the, well, all of the contract, and then also some of the rationale that went into our approach to it. As far as our education support professionals go, we did have a mediation or meeting with a mediator, which is a mediation, on August 25th, 2021. That mediation is still currently open. And our most recent post-mediation offer was submitted to the SEA team on the 1st of October. And it's currently under review by the SEA team. So that does remain open. As far as our custodians and food service specialists, remember we had 3 contracts that were open this year. So there they all are on the left-hand side of the slide. Our first meeting is scheduled for the 20th of October. And so that's where those 3 contracts are at this point. Most recently, we've had a request to bargain, to impact bargain. And for those of you who don't know what that is, in the contracts, there is a clause that says that if there is a change or if there is something that comes down, that the SEA or actually either party feels they need to bargain the impact of that situation, they have the right to do so, and we have the obligation to respond. So there was a request from the SEA to impact bargain on the 28th of September. Specifically, it was to bargain the impact of COVID-19 and the reopening of school. On the 29th, we responded to that request and asked for a little more information and details, and also for meeting times so we could start the process going. We know how important it is for our staff to have those issues addressed. All we really know at this point is that their request is in regard to 4 specific articles that are in the current professional CBA, so I can tell you what those articles are. Article 2 is the employee rights and responsibilities section. Article 6 is sick leave. Article 9 is protection of employees. And then Article 13 is differential compensation. So that's what we know at this point. We're basically waiting for available times from the SEA executive team, who will be the group representing the SEA in these conversations. And so that's where things stand right now.
Great, thank you, Nick. Is there anyone else who would like to give a committee report, even if you don't have a slide? Seeing none? Okay. Agenda item 9.0 is student representative reports.
Students at Pleasant Hill had a really good start to school. And staff think they're really happy to be back. They're very diligent about wearing their masks, which is very impressive. They will also participate in a fire prevention program the week of October 18th. On the next slide, the Red Learning Community at Wentworth gathered safely outdoors. They discussed the Wentworth School Respect Code, and they were able to work independently as well. They also explored the garden, and Wentworth will be getting new greenhouses this fall. They're large enough to have a whole class inside, so they'll also be extending their growing season and have a new outdoor classroom to learn outside the box.
Okay, so this is middle school sports are back this year, and compared to last year, they actually did not have games. They were just practicing, but now they have games. You can see that's boys soccer and girls soccer. And something, my sister is on the girls soccer team, and they're dressing up for their game days. I think today they wore button-up shirts and ties. So I'm happy for them that they get that ability. It's cute. And shout out to Bailey Grondin, Lindsay Porter, and Cameron Wandell for taking these pictures. And then the next slide. So at the high school, we have had a busy week last week. It was our spirit week with pep rally, the homecoming football game, the homecoming dance. So at the top, you can see some pictures. That was our Monday spirit day. It was color by grade day. So freshmen were orange, sophomores purple, juniors yellows, and seniors pink. And then we also had some other fun days like PJ Day, Taurus Day, Jersey Day. And then on Friday for the pep rally, we did color by grade day for red, white, black. And at the pep rally, you can see that the white group of people, that's the spirit stick competition. So you get your spirit stick and you put it up and down and yell Red Storm. That is the junior class doing it. And then we also had tug of war. That's the seniors. I think the seniors did win the tug of war, which is good for us. And on the next slide, so that night, it was the homecoming football game, and this homecoming game was very important because it was dedicated to Kyle Sinclair, who was a former Scarborough resident who would have been a junior this year, and he unfortunately passed away at a young age due to illness. So we all wore orange because it was his favorite color, and the quarterback wore number 14 because that was his favorite number. So, and there was place for donations, and I think all the funds were going to Kyle's fund, so that was really special. And then at the bottom, you can see that's what the homecoming dance looked like. It was such a great time. It just felt good to be out there. There was cornhole, s'mores, music, dancing. Everyone was dressed up, even in the cold. It was amazing. And I want to say thank you to administration for such a fun week because it felt like normal and it was so much energy and it was amazing. So.
That's wonderful, Gabby. Thank you. Agenda item 10.0 is new business. Agenda item 10.1 is the FY21 year-end financial report. And so with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Business, Kate Bolt.
Hi, guys. I know you love this. This is your favorite time of year, right? And
This is my
if Diane clicks the slides really fast, it'll be over before you know it. But it is something that we do religiously every year, and we care, and we want to know how our fiscal picture looks at the end of any given year. So we're already at the end of the first quarter of FY22 right now, but this is the point where we start to look back and we have all the books closed and we're getting ready for audit in FY21. For those of you who are watching along online, I'm sure we have a big crowd out there. I will be referring to supporting documents that were provided with tonight's agenda. And those are posted on the school board's meeting page on our website. So if anybody needs to see what we're talking about, it's all out there. And we will also publish the slide deck as usual after the meeting, and the links are should be live in there as well for folks. So the published financial statement starts with 2 pages of notes and comments, and those 2 pages of narrative intro will contain most of what I talk about tonight, and they'll give direction for folks who are reading it and don't watch the presentation. The financial report is marked pending audit. We have an official version, audited version of the report once the auditors have done their job, and there's actually a whole nother presentation that goes into that. And as with last year's presentation, you'll see that the pandemic environment turned a few of our expectations upside down in FY21. So next, Diane. Thank you. So we start on page 3 of the financial statement with the general fund expenditures section. That's a record of our budget to actual expenditures. On the expenditure side, our fiscal year ended with a large surplus in the general fund. It came in under budget by about $2.9 million, which is about 5.5% of the FY21 operating budget. In a normal year, if anyone remembers what those look like, we typically generate an expenditure surplus of $300,000 to $500,000 simply through turnover of personnel and then careful spending on our discretionary accounts, and other circumstances can affect that. But of course, this isn't what we call a normal year. Knowing that about 80% of our budget is in personnel costs, it's not surprising that the bulk of our expenditure savings were in salaries and benefits, and you can see some of those things here. So along with our fairly typical turnover savings, about $200,000, we also created budget surplus in several specific areas, which you can see on the slide: shortage of substitutes, personnel and special services, some budget savings in health services where we had 2 new positions and several open positions. And we deferred hiring in the curriculum and improvement of instruction department. We had an open position there for almost the whole year. Y'all have heard about transportation ad nauseum. And in facilities and maintenance, we also had unfilled positions. And you can imagine in the course of a pandemic and a hybrid learning year, how difficult it was to attract and retain employees in all of our departments. So in other areas, programs and services, facilities, operations, all of these areas I think will be familiar from some of our earlier discussions and our budget discussions. The impact of deferred and reduced and canceled programs, parents who are asked to transport their children. A big thank you again to our school community for stepping up there, and facilities that were locked down to outside contractors. In facilities, we can also see the impact of federal grant funds, which allowed us to purchase many of cleaning and protective supplies outside of the operating budget. So as most of you know, the school board has a policy requiring year-end budget transfers for any single account that is overspent by more than $10,000, policy DBJ. There are 11 accounts from FY21 that will need year-end transfers. And as usual, I've given you a packet with some details on these accounts. The first page of the packet, it's that I used to say Easter colors, but I think this is more candy cane colors. Bad candy canes. the kind that you don't want, that your grandma gives you. The first page is a chart showing which accounts were overspent and which accounts have available surplus to transfer. And there's some notes to give you a quick reference on why we have a surplus or a deficit. And in each case this year, we can handle the budget transfers within the original voter categories. And that's important because there's a statute that talks about how you can't transfer money from one voter category to another above a certain threshold. The budget transfer document's also posted online right now, and it's linked into the slides for future viewers. So every once in a while, I like to brag, 11 accounts that need some help this year out of 656 general fund accounts is pretty good. Now we're on to revenues. And as we experienced in FY20, a large expenditure surplus generated in FY21 was offset to some extent by a shortfall in general fund revenues, which came in below budgeted projections by $233,000. For the first time in the FY21 budget process, we anticipated the reduction in state subsidy, which has happened due to Maine Care's seed payments over the past few years and has become the norm. So we actually planned for that, and we have a very small deficit in that line as compared with recent years. State agency client reimbursements came in short of budgeted levels by about $61,000. But the remaining areas of shortfall can really be attributed to pandemic conditions, student activity fees, transportation fees, facilities rental revenues, all were affected. So if you're looking at page 4, this chart shows the big picture transition from the beginning to the end of the fiscal year in the general fund. At the top of the chart is the start of the fiscal year, showing our fund balance available at the end of FY20 and the amount committed toward non-tax revenue for FY21. The center of the chart is the story of what happened in the general fund during FY21. A budget surplus of $2.9 million in expenditures, a $233,000 deficit in revenues, year-end adjustments, and the total balance generated by year-end. During budget development for FY22, we gave a lot of consideration to the amount of surplus we would have available for use as non-tax revenue. You may recall my providing some projections at the end of March and recommending that we increase the amount in that FY22 budget from $700,000 to $1 million. I think most of you know that I'm pretty conservative when it comes to estimates, but these actual figures are going to put us in a great position moving forward over the next couple of budget years. This chart shows that we ended FY21 with an unassigned fund balance of $1.9 million, and that's really going to help us avoid a cliff in loss of revenues and in non-tax revenues moving forward. I'll give you a quick note before we move on a recent legislative change. Since 2005, there's been a state statute that requires that districts can't carry forward undesignated surplus in excess of 3% of the previous year's budget without a plan to apply the funds, and there's some fine print about that. In the last legislative session, because so many districts were experiencing this huge influx of federal dollars, and it really kind of threw a wrench into people's budgeting, the legislative session passed a law to allow the allowable surplus carryover to 5% going forward. And they also added exemptions for FY22 through FY25, which will actually allow districts to carry over up to 9%. This surplus that we're looking at right now actually only calculates to 3.6% of our budget, but it just does give us a little bit of flexibility in terms of how we use surplus in the future. Diane's taking notes. How about that? Now we're going to go into the other funds section. That'll start with adult ed on the bottom half of page 4. You can click right away and we'll go into adult ed. So in keeping with our facilities restriction protocols, adult education courses were mainly offered online in FY21. In-person access was provided for those needing high school credentials and for English language learners. And healthcare courses used a hybrid learning model. Online enrichment courses, both locally sourced and through MindEdge Learning, which is a software system, were very popular with community members looking for a safe and constructive activity. We used CRF funding, coronavirus relief funds, of $8,575 that were specifically allocated just to adult education. We used those funds to purchase laptops, Chromebooks, and peripherals that we could loan to students who might not otherwise have had access to online programming. So due to limited course offerings, our expenditures came in at $70,000 under budget, which you can see in that section. And our revenue shortfall was under $30,000 because we had the receipt of local tax dollars, which support the program. So as a result, you've got a year-end fund balance in adult education of $41,000. And we knew that was going to be the case, so that when we built the budget for FY22, we used $30,000 of that as revenue, which is a much higher number than we usually use. It's generally $2,000 or $3,000. School nutrition program is at the top of page 5 of the financial report. In school nutrition, operating procedures were reinvented to complement the new hybrid learning model. Meals were ordered online, packaged for individual delivery, delivered to classrooms and open spaces, and made available for students to take home for remote days. Because no a la carte items were offered, we had a lot of savings in food costs and labor. And we also used $46,000 here in CRF funds, coronavirus relief funds, for supplies and equipment. In the spring of 2020, the USDA created waivers to allow districts to receive meal reimbursement under their summer food program model. And then they extended those waivers through the entire 2020-2021 school year. So school meals were offered free to all students. And so you'll see there's virtually no food sales revenue on the sales report. And all the federal funding you can see is posted to the summer meal revenue account, which is a very odd looking statement. School nutrition, therefore, came in under budget on the expenditure side, but the loss of in-school meal sales was not fully offset by federal reimbursements. And the revenue shortfall creates the need for a year-end fund transfer of $420,391. And that is one of your action items tonight. So continuing with the bottom half of page 5, the detailed financial statement closes with federal grant funds and local and state grants and trusts. To quickly point out a couple of items in local funds. Tech maintenance funds were used in FY21 to support the purchase of replacement devices for students. Those are the fees that we used to collect for technology for laptops from that students use at school. We don't do that anymore, but we still had a significant fund balance there. And the remaining balance is still available for ongoing maintenance costs and purchases. And then the other one I'd call your attention to is the school nutrition special programs line. And that's where the generosity of the community is reflected, because those are donations that were given to the backpack program. And you can see a lot of money in and a lot of money out used to provide healthy food for families in need in our community. Now we get to the various federal grant funds that were made available to schools to address the unexpected needs created by the pandemic. And understandably, there's been a lot of public interest in this area. And we've also had a lot of conversations in this group and in finance committee and in budget process around these funds. We were very fortunate to receive almost $6 million in multiple grants over the past 18 months. The amounts you see represented on this slide are the totals used in FY21. The total grant amounts are actually represented on the financial statement. You can see them there. So linked into this slide, which folks can take a look at their leisure, are a grant summary down at the bottom, which includes all the grants, and then some details about the 2 biggest grants. And they'll be available once the slide deck is posted. And I would also encourage folks, if they're really interested in this topic, to watch the video of the School Board Finance Committee meeting on September 1st, where we went over these charts and we went into a lot of detail. The CRF funds are done, but we will still have the ESSER funds. We'll still be reporting out on those. We've spent a portion, about half of ESSER 1, a small portion of ESSER 2 in FY21. Sorry, ESSER 3. Sometimes the acronyms get me. As if we didn't have enough in education, right? So in the summertime, we used the other half of ESSER 1. And that was on summer programs. We had some pretty robust programs this summer, which were, I think, really exciting. And I think Monique plans to talk to this group about those. And then ESSER 3, we used a little bit of money where it says here for summer program software. We bought that in advance for the use of the high school kids for the most part this summer. Oh, and if we're paying attention, we'll notice that there is no ESSER 2 on there, even though I said there was, because ESSER 2 was held in reserve for use in this current fiscal year. So capital improvement projects is the last page of the financial statement. That's page 6. Most of these CIP accounts are multi-year ongoing areas of investment. In CIP and FY21, you'll see that tech purchases were lower than usual, technology purchases, mostly due to the availability of CRF funds, where we really put our focus there into upgrading some systems and devices. The new modular classrooms, which we all talked about at great length last year, were completed and furnished at the beginning of FY21. So we started occupancy there in the fall of 2020. And then apart from some critical HVAC, that's heating, ventilation, air conditioning work at the middle school, we spent most of our energy really in FY21 on pandemic response. And we limited our capital projects to some of the normal incremental repair and replacement for our existing infrastructure. You'll see on the statement that there was funding budgeted for long-range planning, which we retained and we added to in the FY22 budget, which will allow us to move forward with plans for upgrading school facilities. And that absolutely remains a priority as we look at town growth and development. So that's pretty much the walkthrough. This slide has the action items that we're asking for. And I think my friend Sarah wants to read some numbers. She said she wouldn't mind doing that one more time. I kept it to 2 numbers. So
Making it easy on me for my last go here.
do you want me to take questions before?
I was going to say, just before we have our motions, does anyone have any questions or comments for Kate?
Riveting.
Kate, thank you as always for making this accessible and easy to understand and walking us through this. For those of us who don't sit on the finance committee, and really get the deep dive, your documents are still amazing to me. And I know that, I love paper and this is exciting to get to look at all of this stuff. I should have come to finance just to reminisce because
Oh,
this is great.
thank you for your kind words. We're making finance fun, right?
Always for 3. Kate Bolton making finance fun for
Should have made
29 years.
T-shirt,
Yeah. That was a missed opportunity on our
It
part.
really was. It really was.
Okay, Kate sent me the motions. They look slightly different than what you see on your screen, but the same spirit. So move approval to authorize budget transfers for accounts overspent by more than $10,000 as presented to the school board by the business office.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? I think we're all set to vote, Diane.
Great. Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia?
Yes.
Okay, and move approval to transfer $420,391 from general fund year-end fund balance to cover the school nutrition fund deficit.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none?
Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia?
Yes.
Excellent. Both motions passed. Thank you, everyone. Agenda item 10.2 is a motion to approve the MSBA resolutions. Before I either make a motion or accept a motion, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon, who went to the Region 7 meeting to kind of give us her take on what some of the other districts had for conversation. And then I'm going to open it up to the floor for us to have some conversation before we decide what our motion should be.
Sure, thanks. So the way that we reviewed the proposals are in a different order than what the new document looks like. So mine are going to be a little bit out of order, but I have them titled, so I think we'll be okay. So the first one we talked about was the student absenteeism proposal. The resolution in the past, it used to be student and staff absenteeism, and they wanted to remove teacher absenteeism because they don't feel that that's a school board responsibility. That's really an admin's job and not ours. And so they just felt, since it's not our responsibility, we really shouldn't have a resolution that discussed it. The temperature in the meeting, really in the whole meeting throughout for all of these, was that they just, the people in attendance really wanted to see the resolutions not be so prescriptive and really telling the boards what to do, but rather offering suggestions or allowing the school boards to have a little bit more discretion. So, in what they decided to do. So really that's the overall temperature for everything that we're going to talk about today. So that was, do you want me to just keep doing this like one by one? Okay. The next one we discussed was school board training. They essentially added a sentence that just talked about possible areas of discussion, including equity in education, FOAA, explanation of MSBA services, et cetera, et cetera. This was a pretty quiet one. The only questions they had that the people in the room had was they wanted to know what equity meant. Equity in education meant. And the definition as MBA believes it to be is that equity refers to equity in school for all students and equitable access of education for all students. The next one was curriculum policy. They essentially wanted an addition of a sentence that read, include in-person, remote, and regional collaborative learning opportunities. They expounded on this a little bit because the thoughts were that smaller districts share resources a lot. So the good example they gave was that one school might have a Spanish teacher and one might have a French teacher, but we collaborate and we share our resources. So that was a piece of it. The other piece, of course, was the remote learning that's happened during the pandemic. The thought here, which was interesting, was it said the sentence read and include. They asked that it be replaced with may, the word and, be replaced. So that the thought isn't that we have to offer remote learning, but we might. Remote alternative programs was replaced with multiple pathways. This is a wording change to just reflect current practices. No questions or suggestions came from that one. The rewrite and combine the resolutions to form the new resolution teacher evaluation. There was no comments or suggestions. Administrator shortage. They wanted to add verbiage around reestablishing leadership academies that have not been used of late. What they thought was, or what they've seen is that there's not a good viable pool of candidates for administrative positions going forward. So what they thought was if they reestablished this leadership academy, it would encourage people to take it, first off, to be available when positions open in the future, and that they would be ready to do that. So they did say that there's an intent for state funding for this and support from local universities. So to support the reestablishment. No questions there. The funding of services to students with severe disabilities. It was a word change. They wanted to change develop to maintain. That was also no questions or suggestions there. Deletions were very quickly discussed. All of the deletions are due to new resolutions or changes in legislation. So nothing important necessary, nothing outside of that, not important, nothing outside of those two changes there. And then the new and revised, the learning loss, they wanted to change.
I'm gonna put a pin in it just for a quick
sorry.
second. That's okay. I think probably the easiest thing to do for us as a board is to vote to approve the edits that they made, for lack of a better word. What do I want to call them? Substitutions, deletions, revisions. And then we can discuss the two new proposed resolutions and vote on those.
Yeah.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the recommended MSBA changes to their previous documented resolutions?
Second.
Discussion? Right?
Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. And Shannon, thank you for attending the Region 7 meeting and being able to run through the rationale on all of that. I think it gives us exactly the level of context that we need to make an educated vote. So now let's move forward and talk about, there were two proposed resolutions this year. Sometimes we've seen 4 or 5. So they are moving forward with 2 this year. One they've titled Learning Support. So let's start with that one.
So I go on now. Okay.
Yes, please.
This used to be learning loss, and what they are hoping to achieve here by changing the word from loss to support is that we're encouraging a more proactive approach, and we're really encouraging or we're really putting a more positive spin on something versus a negative connotation. So it's a verbiage change for that reason. There is no questions or suggestions with the group.
Okay. Does anyone else from our board want to make any comments or ask questions about this particular resolution? Nick?
I guess I would just say that wording it to be more of a positive kind of mitigation step as opposed to like some kind of consequence of some kind of educational failing is really important given what we've experienced in the last 18 to 24 months. So I'm glad to see MSBA put this forward. I think it's wise moving forward that we shift our perspective on this type of thing. So I just felt like we should make a comment on something with this.
Thank you, Nick. Anyone else? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the MSBA proposed resolution titled Learning Support?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Mrs. Giftis?
Yes.
Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertulia.
Perfect, thank you. The second of the two resolutions they've titled Dropout Prevention.
This one, the timeline was extended to 6 years. So if you think about back to the extension made to special education availability or eligibility, that's what this is. That's what the change is for, to put this in line with that change with the special education eligibility. Again, no comments or questions from the group.
Great, does anyone from our group have comments or questions? Yeah, Kristen.
I'm guessing since you said no one had any questions, this probably didn't come up, but does that mean that schools will change how they report their graduation rates? Like how does that, I don't know how that reporting works, but if we report our graduation rates, right, each year, does that mean that will be delayed?
No, they did not. They did not mention that. That's a good question.
It's
Do you have any
interesting, Kristen, 'cause
insight
when
on
I
that?
read it, I definitely interpreted it that we're not going to be reporting dropouts.
Right.
Because we're extending that deadline, but then how do we report on our actual data?
So I would just add that this is a resolution by the MSBA, not necessarily legislation, and so it's not it's not binding,
So it doesn't
Right,
change anything from. your
but it
perspective.
is an imperative to move in that direction. Right?
Thank you.
Good, thank you, Diane.
Sure.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the MSBA resolution titled Dropout Prevention?
So move.
Second?
Discussion? I think we're ready to vote.
Mrs. Giftis? Yes. Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you, everybody, and Shannon, best of luck to you at the delegate assembly. I can't wait to hear how it goes. Agenda item 10.3 and 10.4, I'm going to bundle into one motion. They are the meeting minutes of August 19th, 2021 workshop and the meeting minutes of the August 19th, 2021 business meeting. Do I have a motion to approve both as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none?
Mrs. Giftis? Yes. Dr. Gill?
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos?
Yes.
Ms. Layton?
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom?
Yes.
Mrs. Seither?
Yes.
Mrs. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Giftis?
Yes.
And Ms. Bertulia.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Agenda item 10.5 is SMS chorus donation. I'm going to turn this over to Jeff.
Yeah, so thanks to the work of our choral director, Jeffrey Moser, we have a gift, a check from the Peter R. Marsh Foundation in the amount of $1,000. It's a music grant, and the guidelines, this also kind of combines some community service or community connections rather, which is great. The grant funds must be used for musical education purposes only. During the school year, music students must provide a minimum of 3 musical performances to senior citizens in our community. Also create the opportunity for the students to have personal verbal interaction.
Sorry, Jeff, can you turn your microphone on, please?
That would help. Let me start over here. Peter R. Jeffrey Moser, our choral director, applied for a grant in the amount and received the grant in amount of $1,000 for the Scarborough Middle School to conduct for musical education purposes only, provided we provide a minimum of 3 musical performances and connections with senior citizens in our community. must also create the opportunity for students to have personal verbal interaction with the audience members at each performance and connect with our community. So we're very excited about this, and we just ask for the school board to accept this grant amount in the amount of $1,000 for the Scarborough Middle, made out to Scarborough Middle School on behalf of our choral and music program.
Do I have a motion to approve the donation?
So moved.
Discussion? I will just say that I love the parameters set around the donation. I think that that is incredibly thoughtful. So thank you very much for that generous amount. I think we're ready to vote.
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertilia.
Yes.
Excellent. Agenda item 10.6 is appointments. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
Okay, so first we have appointments of our Jim Dandies instructors. David Sloatman, Director. Genoa Balin, Performance Level Coordinator. Mayor Trombley, Jim Dandies Instructor, and Meg Lynch, Jim Dandies Instructor.
Want me to bundle them, or do you want to approve them separately? We can bundle them. Yep, we'll just approve all of the appointments as presented when you're finished.
Okay, and then our club activities advice, where am I? High school club advisors,
Do you want to just say as presented?
as presented.
These
Let's do that.
These are part of our agenda packet. There are a lot of names.
Yes, and our middle school club advisors also as presented.
Perfect. And please, 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 advisors, take no offense to the fact that we are not reading the very long list of names. We're very, very grateful for the time that you give our kids and for your willingness to lend your skills to these extracurriculars.
Well, and it's just a testament to how many different
Yes.
activities we are running.
Yes, for sure.
Page and a half, over 50.
Do I have a motion to approve tonight's appointments as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none?
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertilia.
Yes.
Agenda item 11.0 is adjournment. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion?
Miss-
All set.
Mrs. Giftis,
Yes.
Dr. Gill,
Yes.
Ms. Castellanos,
Yes.
Ms. Layton,
Yes.
Mrs. Lindstrom,
Yes.
Mrs. Seither,
Yes.
Mrs. Turner,
Yes.
Ms. Giftis,
Yes.
and Ms. Bertilia.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening.